The serpent in Philo of Alexandria, the serpent as symbolic of Adam's impulses. Philo of Alexandria's allegorical interpretation of the serpent in Genesis presents the serpent not as an external evil force, but as a symbol of Adam's own impulses, particularly the impulses of pleasure and desire that arise within human nature. In Allegorical Interpretations, books 2 and 3, Philo elaborates on this understanding, offering a nuanced psychological and moral reading of the Genesis narrative. This document examines the relevant passages where Philo identifies the serpent with internal human faculties, emphasizing its role as a metaphor for Adam's impulses. Philo begins by noting the nakedness of Adam and Eve before the fall and the subtle nature of the serpent. Open quote, 53. And they were both naked, both Adam and his wife, and they were not ashamed. But the serpent was the most subtle of all the beasts that were upon the earth, which the Lord God had made. Here, Philo explains, the mind is naked, which is clothed neither with vice nor with virtue, but which is really stripped of both, just as the soul of an infant child, which has no share in either virtue or vice, is stripped of all coverings and is completely naked. For these things are the coverings of the soul, by which it is enveloped and concealed, good being the garment of the virtuous soul, and evil the robe of the wicked soul. Close quote. This naked mind, free of virtue or vice, represents Adam before moral choices begin to take effect. Philo's allegory sets the stage for identifying the serpent as something internal to this mind, not an external tempter. Philo develops the metaphor further in his explanation of the serpent's subtle and winding nature as a symbol of pleasure. Open quote, 18. 71. Now the serpent was the most subtle of all the beasts which are upon the earth, which the Lord God made. Two things having been previously created, that is, mind and outward sense, it follows of necessity that pleasure, which brings these two together, must be the third. Pleasure has been represented under the form of the serpent. For this reason, as the motion of the serpent is full of many windings and varied, so also is the motion of pleasure. At first it folds itself round a man in 5 ways, for the pleasures consist both in seeing, and in hearing, and in taste, and in smell, and in touch. Close quote. Philo explicitly equates the serpent with pleasure, understood as the faculty that mediates between mind and sense. This pleasure is diverse and insidious, full of many windings, reflecting the serpent's physical movement. Among these pleasures, the most intense and vehement are sexual pleasures, connected to generation and procreation by nature. Philo advises temperance to act as a serpent guarding the soul's path, a metaphor for controlling these impulses before they lead one away from virtue. Open quote, let then the principle of temperance be a serpent in the soul, which makes its advance through all the circumstances of life, and let it sit in the path. And he recommends him here to occupy and to fill with ambush and stratagem the well-trodden path of passion and vice. Close quote. Philo continues to explore the Genesis dialogue where the woman, Eve, claims that the serpent beguiled her. Open quote. 59. And God said to the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And she said, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. God asks one question of the outward sense, and she replies to a different one. For he is putting a question which has reference to the man, but she in her reply speaks not of the man, but of herself, saying, I ate, not I gave. Close quote. Philo uses this to explain the interaction between the senses and the mind. When the outward sense is filled with an object, e.g., something pleasurable, the mind takes its share and is nourished by it. Thus, Eve's I ate implies the outward sense receiving pleasure, and Adam's the woman gave me indicates the mind accepting that pleasure. Philo differentiates between the roles of the outward sense and pleasure, the serpent. Open quote. 61. But take notice that the man says that the woman gave it to him, but that the woman does not say that the serpent gave it to her, but that he beguiled her. For it is the especial property of the outward sense to give, but it is the attribute of pleasure which is of a diversified and serpent-like nature to deceive and to beguile. Close quote. While the outward sense presents objects as they are, pleasure deceives by presenting things as more advantageous than they truly are, thus misleading the mind. Philo addresses why God curses the serpent without allowing it to defend itself, while Adam and Eve are both questioned. Open quote. 65. And the Lord God said to the serpent, because thou hast done this thing, thou art cursed above all cattle. Why does God curse the serpent without a defense? Close quote. Philo's answer is revealing. The serpent is pleasure, intrinsically evil and blameworthy, without any seed of virtue. Therefore, it requires no defense. Open quote. 67. We must say, the external senses are of an intermediate nature, very naturally, since it has a nature which is not necessarily and intrinsically evil, but which inclines at different times. It is not condemned till it has itself confessed that it followed the worse inclination. 68. But the serpent, that is pleasure, is of itself evil. On this account, it is absolutely not found at all in the virtuous man, but the wicked man alone enjoys it. Close quote, Bot. Pleasure, like the serpent, is a destructive and deadly animal by nature. Open quote. 76. Animals too of similar variety of character, as beyond all question is the serpent. For he is a destructive and deadly animal by his intrinsic nature. And as the serpent affects man, so does pleasure too affect the soul, in reference to which fact the serpent has been compared to pleasure. Close quote. Philo's allegorical interpretation underscores an important theological point. The fall involves no essential change in Adam's nature, but a change in his relation to God due to moral failure. Adam was created a living soul, a natural body with a mental constitution giving moral relation to the deity. His impulses, symbolized by the serpent as pleasure, already existed before disobedience. Open quote. There was no change in the nature of Adam when he became disobedient. The impulses that lead to sin existed in Adam before disobedience, as much as they did afterwards. Else disobedience would not have occurred. These impulses are in their own place legitimate enough. We can judge of this matter by experience. There is no such thing as essential evil or sin. Evil and sin are relative terms. The difficulty is to keep the impulses in the legitimate channel. Close quote. This perspective aligns with Philo's view of the serpent. The serpent pleasure is a natural but dangerous impulse, requiring temperance and control to prevent it from leading to vice. Summary. Philo of Alexandria's allegorical exegesis of the serpent in Allegorical Interpretations, books 2 and 3, interprets the serpent as the embodiment of Adam's internal impulses, specifically pleasure that unites mind and sense but deceives and beguiles. The serpent's subtle and winding nature metaphorically captures the multifaceted, often insidious character of pleasure. The serpent is not an external evil force, but a natural faculty within human nature that must be controlled through temperance. God's cursing of the serpent symbolizes the condemnation of this pleasure when it leads away from virtue. Importantly, Philo maintains that Adam's nature remained unchanged by disobedience. The impulses represented by the serpent existed before and after the fall. The moral challenge lies in managing these impulses rather than eliminating them. Thus, the serpent in Philo's allegory is a profound symbol of the inner human struggle with natural impulses, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of moral psychology in the Genesis narrative.